Good evening. We will call to order this meeting of the Planning and Zoning Board for May the 21st. We begin, as always, with adopting our agenda. Does anyone have any modifications to the agenda? If not, I would entertain a motion to adopt.
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor of adopting the agenda say aye, please. Aye. Any opposed say no. That motion carries unanimously. We move on to approving the minutes for our regular meeting. We did not have a work session previously. So the only minutes in question tonight are April 23rd's regular meeting. Once again, if anyone has any modifications to those minutes, I'd like to hear them now. Otherwise, a motion to approve the minutes would be in order.
So moved.
Multiple, and I guess one of you can second it as well.
I'll second.
How about that? And all those in favor of approving the minutes say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed say no. That motion carries unanimously as well. We have no cases with a public hearing this evening, so I will dispense with talking about how we handle those things. We will go right to our cases without public hearings, which are much easier to discuss. We will have our staff person present the case to us. After that is concluded, we will hear from the applicant, who will have 10 minutes to speak with us. After that, members of the board may ask questions of the applicant and or of the staff, and we will then deliberate if a motion comes before us. We will deliberate that motion and we will make a decision one way or the other, and then send that recommendation to town council. Without any further discussion, we will move on to that case, which is 17 REZ 30. Mr. Hales is with us this evening. Hello.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. We are excited to bring this case before you this evening, which is a rezoning for about 10.5 acres on Asheville Avenue to facilitate redevelopment of an aging office park near WakeMed Cary Hospital. So as I mentioned, the project is located behind WakeMed Cary Hospital, between the hospital itself and US 164, sort of close to the intersection of Kildare Farm Road and Tryon Road. The site is currently occupied by 8 single-story masonry buildings with, you probably remember the teal roofs if you go out there very often, built in the early to mid-1990s, and they are approximately 95,000 square feet on the site in its entirety. Existing zoning is general commercial conditional use, which has been in place since 1990, and the conditions address a lot of things that are already addressed by the LDO today, being access points, stormwater, and architectural compatibility. There is also a use restriction on the site that restricts it to office use only. The proposed zoning is MXD. The site is located within the mixed-use overlay district, which allows them to go to MXD zoning and include a PDP to show what they're proposing to develop. And this is to facilitate redevelopment of the site in conjunction with growth in the WakeMed Cary Hospital itself. So the proposed PDP before you this evening has all 8 of the existing single-story buildings removed. Those would be replaced with 2 multi-story office buildings and structured parking, which would house the majority of the parking for the site. The 95,000 square feet of office use on the site today would grow by more than 150% to almost 241,000 square feet total. The plan does include a couple minor modifications to development standards to facilitate this redevelopment. The first being is that the maximum building height is being increased from 50 feet to 90 feet. There are 2 champion trees along the Asheville Avenue right-of-way that would have to be removed to facilitate location of the building, and new driveway entrances to align with the existing entrances to improve vehicular safety along the corridor, and a slight reduction in the average width of the highway corridor buffer along 164. I will also note that there is a change from the staff report due to some last-minute review comments of the PDP, and that is the right turn lane into the entrance here. There's a condition that says they will be offering to restripe to include that right turn lane. At this time, there's not enough detailed information for staff to determine whether or not restriping to get that turn lane in is feasible. So we are asking them to remove that condition in its entirety, and we will evaluate the need for that turn lane and any solutions at the time of site plan when we have full engineered drawings. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. The applicant has included some conceptual building elevations as part of their application packet. These are preliminary and conceptual only. The architectural aesthetic here is consistent with modern medical office buildings and with what is being done with the vertical expansion proposed at WakeMed Cary Hospital. I would point out this is not a zoning condition, it is not binding, and it represents only a single way to design these buildings with the minor modifications requested the architectural standards. However, the architectural modifications they are requesting are necessary in order to build something like this under our current standards. Cary's growth framework map designates the area as a destination center, which is intended for the highest densities and development intensity. Buildings should generally be from 3 to 7 stories in height and should generally utilize structured parking to accommodate the increased density. Staff has done a preliminary analysis of the application in comparison to the Imagine Cary community plan and have identified the work and shape chapters as being the most applicable to this project. In relation to the work chapter, this project would increase employment opportunities and strengthen the local economy. It provides improvement in the local appeal by modernizing the office buildings that are today, and provides opportunity to retain existing firms rather than having them to go elsewhere. In regards to the shape chapter, it focuses intensity in strategic locations, in this case an identified destination center. It facilitates redevelopment by offering modifications to accommodate a more modern aesthetic, and increases architectural compatibility with the surrounding development. As mentioned earlier, the site has good access to major arterial roadways, including Kildare Farm Road to the east and Tryon Road to the south. It includes access to signalized intersections, being the existing signalized intersection at Wakemed Drive at Kildare Farm, and they're offering to install the signal at the Asheville Avenue and Tryon Road intersection. The site also has good access to both local and regional transit opportunities with an existing Go Cary route along Kildare Farm Road and existing Go Triangle transit routes along Tryon Road. There was very little community feedback prior to the public hearing. There were 2 members of the public that attended the neighborhood meeting on December 6, 2017, and those comments at that time were basically related to other opportunities for redevelopment and development within the area, and the same with some calls and general email inquiries. No members of the public spoke at the hearing, and council discussion was limited to general support of the redevelopment opportunity. So staff this evening is offering our recommendation that you find the rezoning to be consistent with the Imagine Cary community plan for the reasons already mentioned in regards to the work and shape chapters in particular, and our preliminary recommendation for the rezoning is approval. This concludes staff's presentation. I'll turn it over to the applicant.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Mr. Chair, members of the Planning and Zoning Board, Jason Barron with Morningstar Law Group here on behalf of my applicant HTA. They are the owners of the site and the proposed developers of this fairly exciting redevelopment project. I was joking with Kevin before the hearing started that I kind of wanted to string this one along a little bit because it's rare that a zoning case comes along that seems to check all of the boxes and isn't highly controversial, and it's infill and it's redevelopment. And this is one of those unique opportunities where what the Cary Community Plan is looking for in terms of redevelopment for large-scale office projects in proximity to existing medical facilities, redeveloping mid-90s style office buildings. I mean, it checks all of the boxes. And so I'm going to keep my comments incredibly short and just let you know we are here to answer any questions that you all might have, but we're incredibly excited about this opportunity. Appreciate the staff's working with us on the preliminary development plan because those are never easy, and we're here to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. I will start on this side of the table if anyone has any questions for either the applicant or for our staff.
I have none.
Moving right along.
Thank you, Kevin. That was a good presentation. One of the rezoning requests in here concerns the buffer along 64 and 1 down to 30 feet, if I understand that right.
It's a minimum 30 feet with an average width of 43.
Okay, so going to 30 feet, how frequently do we have that situation here within Cary? Is that something that happens often? I know that's a little bit tight.
It is not, and that is probably due to the fact that the ordinance just changed and removed the thoroughfare buffer overlay, thoroughfare corridor buffer overlay, and changed it to a normal buffer. And so the regulations regarding that and allowing that reduction to that 30-foot minimum are fairly new.
And so that hasn't been the situation in the past.
That has not been.
Yeah, so that's something new that it would be consistent with our ordinances and so forth going forward?
That would be an allowable request, correct. That would be consistent. 30-foot minimum is consistent with other buffers.
Okay. And then there's also a number, the design looks very pretty, that was shown there, but that comes with a lot of adjustments or variances from our building ordinances right now, as far as the exterior and things like that. Why is that occurring?
Pull the picture up to talk from. So our design standards are, or were written in 2005. They haven't been updated significantly since. And they are designed to get a very particular aesthetic. Brick, masonry, very traditional, almost colonial at times. The way the office market has been moving has been toward more modern materials. If you look at what's been done at Weston, which is now, it's an office park, so it's exempt from architectural standards. Our standards don't contemplate newer materials. Composite aluminum panels weren't around in 2005 or weren't widely used in 2005, so materials has obviously changed significantly. Our architectural standards are designed to create a very symmetrical building. Composition, for instance, requires visual balance across the center line. Modern architecture tends to have asymmetric elements, and you'll see the entrance elements here, for instance, are asymmetrical with a column and a roof line and nothing landing on the other side. Use that asymmetry to draw the eye and create a sense of this is where the entrance is. This is what we're trying to emphasize. And so there are architectural principles which cannot be accomplished under existing standards. The metal panels floating above the glass with no connection here breaks the expression. It's a great design, it's visually appealing, just not consistent with architectural standards. So in order to design a modern office building, you either have to be located in a Weston or Regency, or you've got to request modifications to the standards.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
So to that point, were there exceptions made here? There wasn't anything in the notes that I saw referencing the external appearance of the building. Was that something that was just decided at the staff level, or does that fall within your judgment about what is appropriate for the site?
There are a list of modifications that are requested in the staff report. There are 9 standards there. I don't remember exactly how many they're modifying, but the majority of them they're modifying to some degree or another.
Okay.
That's part of the rezoning.
Okay, thank you.
There was some comments in your report that perhaps the appearance could be more narrowly defined than it was defined in the application.
Sure.
What are we talking about as perhaps additional items that might define it better? So
the architectural modifications, and I called out 2 specifically. The first being materials is very broadly constructed, which is we'll only do 20 or 25% masonry material. So they're not offering going down to 25 from 75. So they're not telling us they're not committing to what that other material would be. They're showing composite aluminum panel, great, it's wonderful, looks very nice. Could be stucco, could be ephes, could be brick. I mean, there's nothing to prevent them from using masonry, but it's just a very broadly constructed condition. The other one was transparency. They requested a reduction, the transparency on the first floor from 35 to 20%, citing the use of the building for medical office. There are obviously privacy concerns with providing a lot of windows in the first floor patient rooms, but some of that could be overcome by design and putting a corridor there instead of patient rooms. So just wanted to bring your attention to it. There's nothing there that gives a great deal of heartburn, but just the materials one is very broadly constructed, and there are probably design alternatives to the second transparency one.
We'll just keep on going to the right.
Sure, I have a quick question. If you could clarify what the current buffer requirement is for the site along the 164, specifically what the minimum would be, were it to redevelop without this rezoning.
The requirement today would be 100 feet.
Okay.
It was reduced to 50 feet in a previous rezoning. So today, if it wasn't going to be the rezoning, it'd be 50.
Okay, all right. That's my question.
So it's a 3-foot average reduction.
Okay, gotcha.
Steve?
Just a quick question for and this might be something you guys work out later, but for the main access, are you thinking that folks will come down Asheville, or they would come in, I think it's the road that goes behind the hospital, off Kildare Farm? Is it, Medical Center Drive? Is that something that, I can imagine a lot of cars going between the hospital, where the hospital has their parking decks, and weaving back through there?
I would imagine there's fairly even distribution, but do you want to have your traffic guy comment?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? My wife was texting me.
So for the, this is going to increase significantly, so it's going to, bring more folks into the area. How do you see people coming to these new buildings from Kildare Farm? Are you going to think people are going to funnel all the way down to Tryon, or they're going to cut behind the hospital, where I guess it has a name, Medical Drive, but to me it's like a service road almost, between the hospital and their parking decks. And you can come around where that old Charlie's is to kind of get back in that area.
I imagine it'll be some of both. I mean, if you're coming from the north, it'll be faster to turn right off Kildare Farm into the hospital and come in off Wake Medical Drive. If you're coming from the south, you can kind of do a 50-50, whether you want to turn onto Tryon or go up through the signal. Like, probably depend on whether you missed the left turn arrow there at Tryon and Kildare. Looking at the TAR that was prepared, they assumed that most of the traffic coming from the south on Kildare Farm would make the left turn onto Tryon and then turn right onto Asheville Avenue.
Because they're building looks like a very nice development right there across where you would turn to Wake Medical Drive. There's another, I'm guessing, medical building going up over there as well. Okay, that helps. Thank you. Is that it?
I don't have any questions for staff or the applicant.
Okay, I just have two. One is sort of more of a summary, and we've heard everyone on this side of the table ask essentially about the same thing. It's somewhat unusual that when we see a rendering, whether it's in one of the neighborhood meetings in the beginning or something like that, where we're told, or the audience is told, this is not binding to the rezoning. It's rare we see it in the rezoning package when it's not binding with the rezoning. And what also strikes me somewhat unusual, and it may strike some of my colleagues on the board as well, it seems that some of these, I believe Victor called them variances, some of these departures from our standard ordinance aren't usually tapped as zoning conditions, even in a PDP, as much as they are dealt with later at site plan or something like that. But I think you might have answered that when you said if it were an office park, that's where you deal with it. But in this case, under MXD, you have to deal with it as a zoning condition. Is that my correct reading of that?
Staff is limited in the ability it can modify things at an administrative level. The requests that they are making exceed that level. And so therefore, the only way to do it would be through a zoning and then to go QJ later on. And so since they're already having to go through the rezoning now, it was easier to request it now.
So it's either the rezoning now or a quasi-judicial later, either or?
That would have been an option.
Oh, okay, I see.
But the PDP allows them to request modifications or set their own standards for basically, there's a few things that are exempted, but basically most things in the ordinance. So.
And as for the rationale behind it, it sounds very understandable that there is some development going on. There's modifications to the hospital. This is to look thematically like that, and in order to do that, the 2005 era standards don't allow for that. So I could see the rationale behind it. It's not like anyone's trying to sneak anything through. So thanks for clarifying that, because I was a little curious why we saw that in a rezoning when typically we don't. The other question involves the mitigations for the traffic. I saw quite a few that were not going to be done, but they had explanations. Are we comfortable that the important ones are being dealt with? I assume Asheville Avenue are the important ones for us in this case. So.
Correct. Staff looked at the other mitigations in the TIA and decided that the impacts to the intersections listed were so minimal and the improvements listed would have a minimal improvement, so they decided that the not having them offered was acceptable.
Great. That's the only other questions I have. Anyone else on either side have any more
Mark,
questions?
can I just
whatsoever?
continue on?
Go right ahead.
On this variance issue, so as we're considering this rezoning with these variances, we are being explicit in saying it's not going to be consistent with our LDO, but it's going to be just something else that we figure out down the road. But we don't know what the other design elements are really going to be until you guys get into the process much later. So it's conceivable this could be a big blue building with yellow lettering on it and flags out front.
It could be, and you saw modifications to the architecture for the big blue building with yellow lettering and flags out front as well.
But if we okay this, is that flexibility now built into the rezoning and the conditions that, it's a pretty wide gamut of, it's aluminum, it's titanium, it's brick, it's white, it's blue, it's whatever that could occur down the road?
Whatever you approve is what is the zoning condition. So it does modify the materials to be, instead of 75% modular masonry, it's going to be 25% modular masonry. Does not specify what the other 75% of the building would be. Color is irrelevant. We don't really regulate color other than numbers, so it could be blue, pink, green, whatever. So there are specific standards. It's not a blanket exemption. They are modifying it in certain instances to a certain degree. I think that answers the question, but if not, then clarify and I'll expound.
That does, and just to finalize, so you characterized our current design standards as having put in place back in 2005, I believe?
Correct.
So is there an anticipation that we're due for some adjustments in those things? Is that in the plan to
I think
update those?
that is a fair anticipation. I do not have a timeline for it yet.
Oh, okay, so, all right.
It is on the list of act amendments that are in process.
All right, thank you very much.
Any other questions? Does anyone have a motion in mind?
I'll be glad to do a motion.
Be my guest.
I move that the board forward case number 17 REZ 30 to Town Council with a recommendation for approval, as it is consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans and is reasonable and in the public interest for the reasons discussed.
Thank you. Have we a second?
Second.
Mr. Chair, can I please ask that we modify the motion to include the change to remove the right turn lane condition? just
Yes,
For
yes.
clarification.
Okay.
Thank you.
You want me to add it, say it again, or are we just saying it's in there?
Just note that you would include the change to remove the right turn lane condition.
Make a note to include the right turn change, lane change modification.
Thanks for pointing that out.
Thank you.
Second
Thank you.
holds? Okay, great. Any further discussion other than the right turn lane?
Just to me, this is going to improve the area. The buildings that are over there now, they are dated. I know there's some questions about the building, but I actually hope it is something modern that's going to enhance the area and be a statement, even though it is kind of isolated back there, but I still hope it's going to be something really modern and add a little flair to that area as it continues to grow.
The applicant said it best for me. It clicks all the boxes, in my opinion, as I understand the plan. I also agree that it's dated. I'd have guessed it had been 10 years older. I wouldn't have guessed the 90s. It does need some improvements.
Any other discussion on this motion? Yes.
So I want to start by saying that I echo what Mr. Barron said in his comments, and that this is the type of redevelopment that we really envisioned in the new comprehensive plan, specifically in a destination center. I really think that this does fit. It conforms. It's really overall a good plan. The only thing that I will say, or to kind of pick, I guess, at, is the issue that I have with the reduction in the buffer. So we have, we'll say, roughly a 100-foot buffer that's already been reduced to 50 feet, and now we're cutting it down to 30 feet. That really does, at least for me, provide some heartburn, because if you drive up and down Route 1 and 64, one of the things that you notice is there are a lot of trees in Cary that you'll see on there, and I just hope that this doesn't set a precedent. There was a similar case a couple years back across Kildare Farms that also reduced the buffer, and anyone who drives past there can see the development that's happening there. And like I said, I just hope that we're not setting a precedent here by reducing that, because I really think that is of value to the residents. But overall, I think it's a great plan, and that's not something that I would want to spear a good plan for. So I'm definitely going to support this.
Anything else?
I would agree with what Ryan said, but I do understand that they have a particular problem here because of that CP&L easement that forces them to push everything slightly back. And that's about the only way to make all of it fit. So they're not just taking away from a buffer for no good reason. It's pretty much a necessity for this particular site. So we have the heartburn, but there's not much we can do about it.
Anything else?
I agree with the comments that have been said, that this is a good fit for this particular area, and I don't have any reservations about the appearance. I think, generally speaking, medical facilities don't really go cutting edge in terms of the appearance factor, so it would be my assumption that it will mesh with whatever's going on at the hospital and make it a unified kind of appearance that all fits together. So I'm in favor.
Anything else?
I just second what some of the folks have said. I'm excited about it because I think it checks a lot of the boxes, particularly as we look at redevelopment. And in healthcare, it's something of an arms race. And if we didn't have something like this come in, I mean, we have an opportunity to have a regional healthcare facility with the development, both the hospital and other development going around there. And I thought about some of the conditions in terms of building type, but also thinking about what we had in place, it really hamstrings the designer and the developers, particularly as they're going vertical. The design elements that we have from 2005 aren't meant for 7-story buildings, are not meant for vertical development, so I can appreciate that staff has that on their agenda. I also second what Ryan was saying about, I hate to give a buffer almost at any cost, but given what is already there, knowing that there's still some buffer from DOT and it's a parking garage, I do shudder to think that we'll soon be like Northern Virginia or something like that, where the development is right up, you know, basically we'll be integrating in the sound barrier walls into the structure or something like that, as we see in other areas. But I'm confident that we won't let that happen. So.
Any other comments? Yes.
Two things. On the buffer, and I share some of the anxiety about the buffer, but on this diagram that you have up here right now, Kevin, if it's anywhere close to accurate, it only appears like it's one lane parking space width across the line, at least on this diagram you have showing right here. It's not a lot. And I'm looking at, geez, boy, this whole issue would go away, one less parking lane. And I'm not negotiating here, but I'm just observing this is a minor issue from a design point of view to make it go away.
And my guess is that some of this is, you know, we haven't done our fine engineering and put everything on the site yet, so it may actually be less than what they're asking for, but they're asking for what they think maximum they may need to make it work.
I understand. I understand you need to ask for the most and go from there. So I don't see it as a big challenge to just meet their requirement. I like this plan a whole lot, but I'm struggling, and I'm struggling with the fact of a precedent. There's so many good things in here, but there's so many adjustments to what our current ordinances are. And we just went through an exercise with a big retailer where we went through a whole list of things we need to do different from our ordinances, and it was an appropriate thing to do. But I'm concerned here that we might be setting up an unintentional precedent here, because the next thing that comes up the next time we meet is going to be, here's what I want to do. Oh, and our LDO and requirements for building are from 2005, and we need to update those. And I could just see opening up Pandora's box here with, and I'm not blaming this design here, but I'm just feeling like, the next guy, the next development, we can go to the 30 feet. We can really adjust and not be consistent with the LDO. And I see that I'm having tension with that. This is setting us up for something that we may not like down the road, unless we have some plans to update our LDO adjustments for appearance and so forth quicker than maybe is suggested here. So I'm struggling on this one, and I hate to say no based on all the good things here, but I'm a little concerned about a precedent-setting here situation for what's coming down the pipe for all the other developments.
Anyone else? The only thing I'll mention, we talked about the LDO and maybe they need to be modified and all that stuff. I want to throw a real shout out to the Cary Community Plan, because with that plan being in place, reviewing this case and with all its different nuances and with the changes to the ordinances and the like, it was so much more straightforward with, is this within our town's vision or is it not? And I'm just so glad that community plan is in place for doing infill projects like this, because it made things a lot more straightforward for me in terms of reviewing it. And I just shudder to think what this would have been like 2 years ago if we'd have been doing it without the community plan in place. I think we've all had something to say, and if no one else wants to jump in with anything else, it's voting time. So would all those in favor of this motion for, let's see, we got 17 REZ 30, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no.
No.
We have one no. So we are 7-1, the motion carries. We are through, I believe, with our agenda. Does anyone have any new / old business, anything like that? Otherwise, motion to adjourn would be the next thing on our list, I believe.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Wow, boy, we've had double motions all night.
Second?
So Mary Jo gets the second on that. All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you and good evening.
This has been a production of Cary TV. Visit the Town of Cary's website at townofcary.org.